A reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 1. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground."
Morning. And like Nathan, I would like to also say Happy Mother's Day to all the moms. And as he's already introduced me, my name's Jason, and I do work here at the church as a pastor and as a therapist. And a few months ago, Nathan approached me and he said, "Would you come and just talk to us for about 3 weeks as we are in this series about what a covenant relationship with God and his relationship with us looks like? Can you come and give us that picture of how that looks within marriage?" So talk to us for 3 weeks about marriage. And I feel like I need to say right up front, he didn't ask me that because he thought I had a perfect marriage, because there is no such thing. And I don't need to tell you that, because you know as well as I do that when you put two imperfect human beings in a relationship to one another, everything does not go perfectly all the time. And that's why we dive into this topic on occasion, because we need help. We need to be refocused on that. But I also know, in case it matters to you, sometimes when people stand up and they want to talk to you about marriage and give you maybe some advice or some thoughts on marriage, you kind of wonder, so what does that dude know about marriage? And what kind of qualifications does he have to teach me about it? Well, I don't have a whole lot, but I have been married to my wife for 28 years, okay? So I've been in the trenches with you, and we've been doing that. You don't have to clap it. You should clap for her, not me, okay? That's a feat that only, that we won't get into that. But anyway, she would be the first one to tell you, though, and those of you who've been married for quite some time would know this, over the past 30 years that we've been together, because we started dating a few years before we got married, we've changed a lot. And we're not the same people that we were 30 years ago in all kinds of ways. We're not the same emotionally. We're not the same physically. We're not the same spiritually. Life circumstances over that period of time is a lot. There are life experiences that we've had together that were generous and good to us most of the time. I'm blessed to say that. But we've had some difficult times. We've had life experiences that were just cruel at times. But I can say very confidently that through all those changes, there are some things that haven't changed between us. She is my partner in life. She's my favorite person in the world, and she's my best friend. And that's part of what I bring to this topic when I try to teach you about this subject of marriage. I can tell you I also bring some experience of sitting with married couples. I sit with married couples every single week. We sit in a room together and we work through issues. We work through challenges. We work through things that we can do to strengthen the relationship between husbands and wives. So as a counselor, for me, I always look at marriage through several lenses. First lens, as a counselor, I look through it as what's mentally and emotionally healthy for a marriage. What is the best evidence-based research that we have right now that tells us what makes a marriage flourish and grow and thrive? But as a pastor and as a follower of Jesus, as many of you are, I also look through a Jesus lens. I look through the biblical Jesus-centered lens and say, what does that have to say about building a strong, stable, flourishing marriage? And so I say all that to say that's my goal over the next 3 weeks, is to filter everything that I'm going to be teaching you through all of those lenses. And what we're going to do today is we're going to start at the beginning. That's a good place to start. And we're going to talk about a little bit about what makes the foundation of marriage. What marriage is really meant to be. Because marriage is like everything else, right? If you don't start with the right foundation, you don't start with a good, solid foundation, you can work all you want. You can put all kinds of effort into it, And you can create something, but it will not ever be as stable and as strong as it could be if you don't have the right foundation. If you were here last week, Ed sort of started us off on this thinking about marriage as a covenant. We talked about how marriage is a relationship entered into by a husband and a wife, and this covenant is one man, one woman saying to each other, I will be for you and I will be for us for life. So, as we go back to the beginning, we're really going back to the beginning, and you've already heard us read our scripture reading for today. Genesis chapter 1, the very first chapter in your Bible says, then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. Now, I don't know if you had this question, but I bet some of you did as you listened to that scripture read for the first time. You thought to yourself, wait a minute. If God is talking to someone and he hasn't made the human beings yet, who's he talking to? Right? And that's a great question. And it brings up an important theological idea that we need to sort of start with, okay? God is one God, yes, but God exists eternally in three persons: Father, Son, and Spirit. It's what we call the Trinity, right? We also know that God is love. God, in his nature, is love. It's not that God possesses love. He is love, which means he participates in an ongoing relationship within the Trinity of equal, self-giving, self-sacrificial love. So, when God, Father, Son, and Spirit, says, let's make human beings and let's make them to be like us, part of what he is saying is we were created to experience that same type of loving relationship with one another and with God. See, that's why when Jesus was approached and they asked him, they said, so what's the most important commandment? He said, well, actually, there's two that are really important. The two greatest commandments are you love God and you love people. Because this is the way that we represent or we image God within his creation. Now, I need to pause right here because I don't know how you're feeling right now. You probably weren't expecting when I said I was going to talk about marriage that I'd give you a theology lesson, okay? And you might be feeling like the water is getting a little high and it might be getting a little deep in here, and I understand that. But this is important. We need to understand this first to establish the foundation of marriage. And I promise you're going to see where this is going in just a second. But if it's getting a little heavy for you for the next few minutes, let me see if we can give you a better, clearer picture of this. So I asked Charlie and our video team if they would create an explainer video that'll help us get through this tough theological lesson. And I think this will be a little bit helpful for us to see it. So let's watch this.
So in the beginning, when the Father, Son, and Spirit already existed in a loving community, they decided to extend that community by creating humanity. Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. This is a part of what it means to image God. We've been given a job to do in this world. It's our calling or our vocation in this life. We are to rule and reign with God as co-laborers over his good creation. We're told, so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Now don't miss that part about creation right there. That's very important, and we know it's important because it gets repeated in three different ways. In the Hebrew scriptures, they don't have punctuation, so when they want to bold, italicize, and underline something, they repeat it, usually twice. This one repeats 3 times. He created male and female in his image. Then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. So here's what we have so far. Human beings, both male and female, have been given an equal identity and an equal role to play in creation. We are equal image bearers of God, and we have the same equal vocation or job or role within creation. Now, we touched on this already, but let's look at the question. What does it mean to bear the image of God? A lot of people don't know this, but the word in the Hebrew scriptures that is translated as image is the same word that is translated as idol in other parts of the Bible. Anybody remember what the second of the 10 commandments is? The first is don't have any other gods other than me. The second is don't make idols or graven images. Exodus 20 verse 4. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. See that word image? That's the same word from Genesis 1. God said, let's make human beings an image or idol of us, the Godhead, the Trinity. So what does that mean? What does it even matter? Well, in the ancient world, whenever you wanted to worship your God, you would always build a temple and then you place an idol, an image, a representation of your God within that temple. And all the other pagan religions of the time did this. They had a temple or a structure with some kind of carved idol inside of it, and this was the place where their God would live. But right here in the beginning of the story of Yahweh, the one true God of Israel, we learn that the eternal God, who is Father, Son, and Spirit, he also has a temple and he also has an idol or image, but it's not like any other gods. The temple of Yahweh is the earth that he created himself. Isaiah 66 says, "The heavens are his throne, the earth is his footstool." And into his temple, God placed his own idols or images. His idols or his representations are human beings made in his likeness, in his image. And they were placed here to do as God does, to rule and reign in love and righteousness and justice, to exist as God does, in an ongoing relationship of equal, self-giving, self-sacrificial love. Now you might be wondering, what in the world does this have to do with the foundation of marriage? It has everything to do with it. If men and women individually are the images of God within creation, then certainly when a man and woman come together within the marriage covenant relationship, they are to image God there too. And they image God in their marriage by living in the same covenant relationship that the Father, Son, and Spirit exhibit within the Godhead. An ongoing, never-ending relationship of equal, self-giving, self-sacrificial love. Each one of them exists for the good of the other and the good of the whole. For you, for us, for life.
I hope you're starting to see how all of this comes together. But there's a problem that we see that kind of creeps in to a lot of marriage relationships. It's a problem that I see when I work with married couples. And can I just also say that I sadly see this creeping in a lot of Christian marriages. And it's this pattern that develops between a husband and a wife that mainly exists with a lot of, well, hierarchy, domination, a power struggle between husbands and wives. In other words, one partner in the marriage tries to dominate over or use power over or to manipulate the other in order to get a need met, something that they want. And church, can we just sit with the fact that that does not image our God? That is not the image of God as revealed in Father, Son, and Spirit. You know what that dynamic is? That is the curse of sin showing up within the marriage relationship. See, where did the church ever get this idea that, and this is what has been taught in many settings, men are fundamentally created to dominate, to lead, to exhibit power over women? Did we forget something? That's what sin brought us. Genesis 3. You know that story, right? The man and the woman in the garden sin against God. They sin against each other. They choose their own path in which way to go in life instead of the one that God gave them to go. And so God says, because of your rebellion, because of sin, you're going to suffer some consequences. God said to the woman, I will sharpen the pain of your pregnancy, and in pain you will give birth. All you mothers know that came true. But here's what he also said. Another consequence of sin in the world, you will desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you. Did you know that right there is the first time in the Bible that power, control, and domination are mentioned in regards to the marriage relationship? Before this, it was equal image bearers with the same identity, working for the same purpose. Remember, we've read this several times today. God created human beings to rule and to reign over the creation, not each other, right? We are all image bearers of the triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit. So let me ask you this. Does Father, Son, and Spirit rule and reign and dominate over each other? Do they desire to control the other so that they would get their needs met? No. They exist for the other. They exist for the whole. They exist for the relationship, and they humbly serve. They humbly love the other for the good of the other and the good of the relationship. And this is what marriage has been meant to be. Marriage was not meant to be ruled by the sinful desire to power up, to control, to dominate, to manipulate. And as we saw last week when Ed read to us Paul's letter to the Ephesians, he said Christian marriage, it was meant to reverse the power struggle. Christian marriage was meant to be a reflection of God's love to the world all around us. It's meant to be a mirror image of the way Christ has laid down his life for his church, not a power struggle between spouses, a covenant of mutual submission. Both people loving the other just as Christ has loved them. Now, that ain't easy. That's why we don't enter into the marriage covenant lightly, because this can't be done in our power. We can't do this on our own. And since we can't do it on our own, we're going to take a few moments and pray. We're going to pray for the marriages in our church. Nathan's going to lead us in that. You know, one of the very first things that I tend to say when a couple walks into my office for counseling is I will look at the two of them sitting usually on the couch in front of me, and I'll start by pointing to one of them, the husband usually, and say, you are not my client. And then I'll turn to the wife and I'll say the same thing. I'll say, and you also are not my client. You are not the reason that I'm working with you. My client, and then I'll usually point to the middle and I'll say, this right here, the couple is my client, which is just one way of me saying that I am here to help you work for the good of this relationship or this covenant that is between you. And the scary part of that is sometimes it's going to feel like I'm on her side. Sometimes it's going to feel like I'm on his side. And then sometimes it's going to feel like I ain't on either of y'all's side, because there are no sides. There is only the covenant. And the moment we learn how to start working together for us and stop working for only me, that's when the relationship is going to flourish. That's when we start to become what we were created to be, what we just learned, image bearers of the triune God in loving relationship with each other. So I'm gonna leave you with a thought today, just some images, and some of you I know are visual, so this is gonna be good for you because you're gonna get a lot of visuals here today. I want to leave you with a visual for a model for the marriage covenant that illustrates this idea. My wife and I, when we were just starting to date, we were in college, and we wound up at an event where a speaker got up and talked about marriage. And he got up and drew a diagram on the board, and it looked like this. It was the shape of a triangle. And we have carried this image with us for the whole time that we've been married. And as you can see, the diagram of the triangle, this is what a marriage relationship ought to look like. God is at the top of the triangle. You and your spouse are at the bottom. And if both of you throughout your life will make it your goal to live a life that pursues after God, to form your thoughts, to form your character into the likeness of God as seen and revealed through Jesus Christ, if you will love what God loves, if you'll prioritize what God prioritizes, then the natural result of a life like that will be that the two of you will grow closer and closer together as you both pursue and grow closer to God. That's really all it comes down to. Treat your spouse the way you want to be treated. Love and serve each other the way that Christ has loved and served you. It's simple, but it ain't easy, right? But how could you not grow stronger? How could you not grow closer together if this was how you lived your life in this direction? Now, as I said, it's simple, but it ain't easy. And there are times in life when things creep in, problems come into the relationship, and couples start to lose their God-given identity as equal image bearers of God. We allow the culture or our own sinful desires, or even sometimes a well-meaning Christian book or teaching, and it distorts that. And it sets us on a different path. And I want to give you a few examples of how the triangle can get distorted, okay? One way is when we fall into the assumption, and many of us have made this throughout our lives, is, well, all men are one way and all women are this way. Remember there was a book published probably a couple generations ago now, and it was called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Remember that book? And it was a runaway bestseller. People ate that thing up. And I'm sure there's a lot of good points in that book, and I'm not here to just completely down the book, but it's based on a premise. And the premise is, it suggests that men and women, you just need to go ahead and accept. We are completely different species. We exist on completely different planets. And I don't know how that would be an appealing image for people to adopt for marriage. I'm not really interested in being married to somebody from another planet. You know, that's not appealing to me. And I'm saying that lightly, but let's think about it seriously. How many times have you heard gender stereotypes or just generalizations made about men and women? And we say them like they're absolutes all the time in every situation. For example, have you ever heard the one that says, all men are warriors? Men want to go out and conquer. They want to go out and hunt something. They want to go and kill something. Okay, I know some men who like doing that stuff, but not all of them like doing that. Or they'll say something like, all women, they're quiet homemakers who cook and clean and raise their children. And listen, if a woman chooses to do that with their lives, then great. Not all women are built for that. And here's the deal. You don't have to go far in the Bible to find out that not even the men and women in Scripture who were celebrated as great men and women of faith and devotion to God fall into those neat little categories. We say things like, all men are logical and all women are emotional. No, they're not. Trust me, I sit with men all day long in counseling. Men are just as emotional as women. See? I'll tell you what the problem is, okay? This is just a little side note, and this is for free. Here's the problem. Men are just as emotional as everybody else. The culture has convinced men of this lie and conditioned emotionally healthy expressions out of men to the point where the only acceptable emotion in our culture for men to show outwardly is anger. And so when the culture teaches our men that the only emotion you get to express is anger, that's what men tend to do. But that anger comes from a deep hurt or a deep fear or a deep frustration, and they just don't know what to do with it. And so we need to help them, okay? And that's not a generalization. That's just the way it goes. I could go on and on and on, and we could talk about all the cultural stereotypes. But when we take these cultural stereotypes, and what happens is a lot of times the church will take them and we'll baptize them. And we'll say things like, well, this is just the way God made us to be. And then we start telling all men, we start telling all women, this is it. This is the stereotype. You're supposed to be this way. God has ordained it, and you should be like that. And when we do, here's what happens. We distort the triangle. Instead of running towards God, you start running toward a stereotype. Instead of running toward the person that He made you to be, you run toward something that somebody told you you were supposed to be. And the truth is, you cannot run toward God and a stereotype at the same time without distorting the foundational relationship in a marriage covenant. So that's one way we distort it. We find the stereotype and we say, well, that's what I was created to be. Now, you were created to be like Christ. Follow him. Here's another way that the triangle gets distorted. Now, Jesus said, and we all know this, he said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Okay? Now, in case you forgot, your spouse is your neighbor. You should love your spouse. That part is obvious, right? But there's two people that Jesus mentions in this command. There's your neighbor, but then there's also you. And a marriage can become distorted and get out of balance when you aren't holding love for your spouse and also love for yourself in the proper amount of tension. See, sometimes we forget that our spouse is our neighbor and we ignore or dismiss their needs. That goes against Jesus' command. But the problem is we can't also go to the other extreme and ignore our own legitimate needs either. Yes, we are called to be selfless. Yes, we are to serve our partner. Your spouse does matter. But guess what? So do you. A marriage where only one spouse ever gets their needs met is not a healthy marriage. It is not an equal, thriving marriage. And it is certainly not what God intended. And when that happens, it looks like this. See, one spouse's identity gets so important, so big, that it overshadows the other one. One spouse's dreams or their vision for their life or their job or their pursuits start to completely overtake those of their spouse. One is flourishing and doing really good while the other one suffers. Church, again, this is not the image of God. This is not the image of God displayed in a covenant relationship. Marriage is meant to be two people, equally thriving, equally representing and imaging God, moving towards him together, not one overshadowing the other. I'll give you another distortion. And before I get to this one might be tough for some of you in the room. And when I say some of you, I mean the dudes. Okay. This one's called the image of having a tiebreaker husband. This is the image when a husband takes on all the authority in the relationship, and this happens a lot in our culture. And whenever there's a disagreement or we can't quite decide which way to go, we just go with him. He's the tiebreaker. I'm just going to give you the stats. Couples who practice marriage this way are 7.1 or 7.4 times more likely to divorce. 7 times more likely. Marriage expert John Gottman researched all of this stuff, and he found, this is his quote, when a man is not willing to share power with his partner, there is an 81% chance that his marriage is going to self-destruct. Wives who don't believe this, guys, you actually like this one. Wives who don't believe their opinion matters as much as their husbands are 3.8 times more likely to be dissatisfied with their sex life. And that's what you would expect. Because, see, in this model, we're not moving together toward God. We're checking with him first. Now, I will say this can go the opposite way too, okay? This can happen the opposite way too, but this is mostly what we see in our culture. But that's what you would expect, because in this model, you're moving away from that picture of the image of God that is within both the husband and the wife. Last one. And this one is, to me, just common sense. Let's put this one up. One of you is running towards God. The other one's going in the opposite direction. And it stretches the triangle. And this is the hard truth. And it's hard because I know some of you are feeling this right now in your marriages. And you know, and I don't need to tell you, you can run as hard and as fast and as much as you want to towards God. You cannot force your spouse to do the same. See, only they can decide to do this for themselves. And it doesn't matter how much you pray or how much you serve. Until they decide to move, it won't change. Now, trust me, I believe in miracles. I know God can do anything. Of course he can. But I also know that God does not force anyone to follow him either. And I want to say to you, listen, if your spouse right now is in an active addiction, adultery, If you find yourself being abused by a spouse, neglected in your marriage, please hear me. They, your spouse, has broken the marriage covenant. Yes, you can influence them. Yes, you can pray for them. Yes, you can talk about it. Yes, you can get help and go to counseling. But you cannot make them change. See, the triangle is this beautiful picture of a healthy marriage. It really is. But we have to sit with the fact that you are only responsible for your part of it. So if that's where you find yourself, please, if you need the help, get the help. There's no shame in that. We want to provide that for you. Now, I know most of us may not find ourselves exactly in the situation that I just described. Most of us probably, when we sit with this and we think about it, we just need to get with our partner and we need to evaluate and we need to talk and we need to say, hey, where are we on this? In regards to the triangle, what does our marriage look like today? Is it distorted in any way? Where is it distorted? How are we failing right now to image God within our marriage? And I'll say to you, because we've already addressed some of you in here are not married. We get that. Some of you hope to be, though. I'm telling you, now would be a great time to start thinking in terms of building a foundation, building a marriage, a future relationship that looks like that. So before we end, we're going to just give you some time to think about it, to figure out what your next step with God might be on this. Nathan's going to lead us.